Hello and welcome back to my Imperial Armada toy box, which is the second and final toy box in my Star Wars Screams in the Void adventure. Today we're going to build the Imperial fleet and begin working on the logic for this toy box. I should be able to cover all of the logic in 2 episodes. The logic is not difficult to implement. It's actually very easy, but you need to be aware that it will take time to hook everything up. There's a lot of connections you need to make, and they're spread out between the asteroid here and the Imperial fleet, which is going to be out that way. And you're going to spend a lot of time going back and forth between here and there to connect the creativitoys. My goal for this episode consists of 2 objectives. Excuse me. First, I want to show you how to build the fleet, which consists of some Star Destroyers that can be destroyed and some that cannot be destroyed. We need to place all of these ships in a certain way. Second, I want to show you how to implement the logic for the core of the main mission, which is the reconnaissance portion of the mission to find the ship that's carrying the Teasel, and the battle portion of the mission, which is to destroy that ship once you find it. Now, I've already done a little bit of setup here with the creativitoys. This is about half of them that we're going to need. But before we get to those, we need to figure out where to place the fleet. And so I want to start with this large flat terrain block. And we're just going to use this for spacing, but we're going to put it off of the end of this asteroid here like this, and we're going to put 3 of them out here. Okay? And this is to leave room for the TIE fighter that's going to be circling out here on patrol. And then the rest of the fleet will go beyond this point. And if we go up to the set pieces category, we have the Star Destroyer. And so the Star Destroyers can go anywhere between here and the end of the toy box. And I'm just going to go out this way until we hit the edge of the toy box. And I can't go any further. So right there is the edge of the toy box. I can't go further. So I'm going to drop 1, and then I'm going to drop a second one out here about half the distance away like so. Okay? Because we want to leave room for the player to be able to fly beyond the Star Destroyer. We don't want this right up against the edge of the toy box, and we're probably not going to keep this Star Destroyer. Yeah, we might. I don't know. But actually I probably would move this over even a little bit further to leave the player a little bit more room. So if we put this out here about like so, and we'll call that good. So that means I can fly all the way over to here, which should be plenty of space because you're not going to leave the fleet too far, but again, you don't want to be right up close to that. All right, and we're going to place another one kind of halfway back here a little bit between that piece of terrain and out here, and we're going to back up all the way as far as we can go this direction. I'll place one here, and then once again we want to come out about, actually, kind of figuring this out a little bit as I go, but we'll place one down here about halfway. So we're going about a Star Destroyer and a half away from the toy box boundary. And all of our Star Destroyers that we want to put in are going to fit in between here, no further this way than that one out there, no further this way than the edge of that terrain. Okay? So that kind of gives you an idea of the boundary for our fleet. And that's kind of what I wanted to figure out here. And as you can see, this takes a long time to traverse the toy box, which is why it's going to take time to make all of the connections that you need to make. Now we're going to put another little terrain block out here just for a place to drop a few creativitoys so I don't have to go all the way back to the asteroid. So we'll drop this out here like that. Okay. So let's come back to the asteroid and see what I've already placed down. I'm going to leave those large blocks there for now till we're done placing Star Destroyers. Okay, so for the first part of this, most of the toys that you need for this are here, except for the ones that are specific to certain Star Destroyers that we're going to be able to destroy. Okay, so these are kind of, consider them global toys. They apply to the whole mission. We have a level starter. We have the sound generator. Again, this is from the gameplay toys. We have a logic gate. Over here, I have placed a time delayer, a randomizer, and 5 replayers. I would recommend at least 5. If you want to do 10, that would be wonderful. Just be aware it's going to be more work, but I think it will play better if you do all 10. But 5 should be sufficient here to show you what you need. And then out here on this asteroid, I'm going to play, or this little block out here, temporary block, I'm going to place a few more creativitoys. So if we come up to the creativitoys drawer, what we're going to need here is a time delayer. So we'll place that out here. We're going to need another logic gate. And, hang on a second. Just double checking my notes here. Yeah, that should be what we need here for right now. Okay, so let's head back over to the asteroid. So we need to build the fleet in a certain way. There's certain ships that we're going to be able to destroy. We're going to put one down with each of the replayers we have here. So I have 5 replayers. I need 5 Star Destroyers, 1 for each replayer. If you're going to use 10, then you're going to need 10 replayers. You're going to put down 10 Star Destroyers. So let's go ahead and set the properties on these. You're going to set the playback interval to 0. And I'm only going to show you how to do this for one of these things, I think. Well, I'll do this part of it at least. I think this will be good. So for creating the fleet, I'll show you all 5. But for the creativitoys that go with each Star Destroyer, I'm only going to show you one set, because they're all set up the same way. Alright, so playback interval is set to 0 on all of those. So I'm going to come out of the editor, and we're going to step on our first replayer. And on my Wii U, this opens the menu in the lower right, and on my Wii U I press B to start recording, and then I have to step off to get back into the editor. And we go down to the set pieces to the Star Destroyer. Alright, so our first Star Destroyer, we're going to place this one out here, maybe on this end like so. And you want to place these at different heights. You don't want them all to be at a single height. So we'll place one about like this. Okay, and then exit out of the editor. And then we'll step on the replayer again to get the menu in the lower right. Press B to stop recording. Okay. Then we're going to step on the second replayer. Press B to start recording. And we'll place the Star Destroyer for this one. And this time we'll place this one out here, maybe down a little ways. Like that. You want to spread these out a little bit. The exact placement of those doesn't really matter. Just don't bunch them up next to each other. We'll stop recording. Then we'll step on our third replayer. Press B to start recording. for our next Star Destroyer, we'll put this one out here. Let's put this one out over this way. Again, that we don't want to go too far beyond that, so we'll place this one over here. Stop recording. Step on the next one, start recording. You can see we're building a fleet, the beginnings of a fleet. All of the ships we're putting down are all the possible ships that the Teasel could be in, where it could be hiding. And we'll place this one out over this way. Step on, stop recording. Step on the next one, start recording. And this one we'll put out over this way. Raise this up a little bit. And maybe dump this one out here. Okay, and then we'll step on that replayer. Make sure you step on the one you're recording on. The little button under B changes there. So if I stop recording, you can see that changes to a circle. So if it's a square, you know it's recording. And if you have 10 replayers you want to do, you're going to do that for the next 5. Okay, so there are all of our Star Destroyers that can be destroyed. And now we need to hide those within some other Star Destroyers because we want to build a fleet. Not all of these are going to be possible places for the Teasel to be. But we want to be able to have more out here. So there's noise, and because these Star Destroyers are the ones that we're going to launch TIE fighters from, potentially. And so we're going to build just the rest of the fleet, and again, place them at different heights, stagger them around. Don't put them too close to each other, because the player needs to be able to fly in and around these things without running into them. So that's really important. If you do put some close together like those two, I'm going to drop this down a little bit so there's room to fly around there. And place another one out over this way, up a little higher. Don't want to go beyond that ship there. And at this point, you can see that it's going to be kind of hard to find which Star Destroyer is one of them we can destroy, because there's a lot of them out here now. Okay, and I think that should be enough to get the point across. Alright, so there is our fleet. And at this point, we'll go ahead and delete these blocks. So we have a mix of ships out there now that can be destroyed and some that can't. So let's come over here back to our first one. And it might be a good idea to do this next step before you put down all the rest of the ships, because there's a lot of noise out there now. So now I have to figure out which one this corresponds to. So I'm going to press, I stepped on my replayer, I'm going to press A to clear, and then Y to play back. Alright, so we need to keep in mind which one that is out there. And now we want to go over to that ship. And I'm going to show you how to hook this up for one of these ships, okay? All of the rest of the ships are going to be hooked up the exact same way. So this is the ship right out here we're heading toward. That is the first one that we can destroy. That's this one right here. All right, so go back to our Creativitoys. And there's a number of controls that we're going to need. Okay, we're going to need a logic gate. We're going to drop this out here off the end of the ship, kind of near the bridge, so I can tell where these what these controls go to. We need a dynamic trigger. We need a counter. We're going to need an effects generator. And I think that is everything. So those four. And then we need some additional toys. We need some locators and some rail target points. So let's start with the rail target points. So the first one we're going to place right along the front of the Star Destroyer here, about like that. Okay, and I think, did I get that close? Yeah. So right here, we'll place another one about the middle, another one right there. You could get by with one, but I find that 3 makes it a little bit easier to hit this, because if you have just one, you got to be really precise on that. But if you got 3, it's a little bit more forgiving. And then for the locators, the first locator we're going to kind of put at the same level as that middle target point. And we're going to drop this out here. If you look at the little blue square underneath the locator, that tells you where I'm placing this. So I'm going to place the first one there. The next one we're going to place, if I can get this to move up, there we go. We're going to place right there. You can kind of look at where the blue square is there. And we're going to put one on the exact opposite side, right over here. Okay. And then the next one, we'll place out here off the front of, let's see, off the front here, actually. Nope. There it is. Here we go. And right there. So just like you see there, that's where the next one will go. And 2 more actually here, like that, and on either side. Okay, so there's 5 just above the hull, and then 1 right up here. Selecting these again can be a challenge. Here we go. 1 right there. All right. So there's all the controls we need for our mission. Okay, so while we're right here, I think, what's the best way to do this? We're going to spend a little bit of time going back and forth to this asteroid, but that can't be helped. So we're going to go over to our level starter. And there's several things we need to do off of the level starter. And I apologize that you're going to be watching me go back and forth here a little bit, but can't really be helped. And I have not found a good way with my video editor to speed up the video and keep my voiceover in sync here. So, all right, on the level starter, we're going to do several things. So we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze. And we need to head back to our Star Destroyer. One thing I suppose we could do is move this level starter out this way temporarily as we hook each of these up, but there's other toys back there we need to hook up to as well, so I don't know that that's going to save us a whole lot. The first thing we want to do is come over to our dynamic trigger here and turn that off. Okay. And again, these sets of controls over here that I've placed next to the Star Destroyer, you're going to do the same thing for each of these Star Destroyers. Okay. So what we're going to be doing, the placing of these controls, the locators and the rail target points, this all applies to this one Star Destroyer. You're going to do this same thing for every one of the destructible Star Destroyers. All right. And then make your logic connections as I'm showing you for each Star Destroyer. So the first one is we come over to our dynamic trigger and we turn that off. You're going to do that for the dynamic trigger for every Star Destroyer. Okay? And then we have to go back to the level starter, and I won't show you all of these, but I will talk you through it because it's just going to take a lot of time. As I said, these connections are not difficult. You're just going to spend a lot of time going back and forth. And by the way, you'll notice that I put some of those Star Destroyers up kind of high off of the surface of this asteroid. So that's because when we're down here on the asteroid, it's kind of nice to look over that way and see the Star Destroyers. All right, on the level starter, new logic connection on catalyze. And we go back to our Star Destroyer. And I guess I could have picked one of the Star Destroyers that's a little bit closer to the asteroid to show you things you think of in hindsight after you've started that you think you could do better, but oh well, is what it is. All right, so from the level starter, we're going to come to each of the rail target points. And you're going to turn it off. Make that same logic connection for the other two rail points. So the level starter is going to turn off the dynamic trigger. It's going to turn off all three of those rail target points. And you're going to do the same thing for all the rail target points on all of the other Star Destroyers. So we have 5 Star Destroyers, 3 rail target points per Star Destroyer. That's 15 rail target points that the level starter needs to turn off. Because when you come into the toy box, the rail target points need to be hidden. Turning them off does that. And shooting them won't have any effect if you did happen to hit one that was invisible. And all of the dynamic triggers need to be off. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward. All right, so on the dynamic trigger now, we're going to connect up to the locator that's right here off of the bridge. This is where we want the player to fly past to determine if this is the ship or not. That's the reconnaissance part of this. And on the dynamic trigger for the properties, the target needs to be the locator. Trigger distance, I'm going to set this to 50. That should be sufficient. That encompasses about to the end of the Star Destroyer here and out about this way. So if you fly pretty close to that bridge, typically over the front of the bridge, then that'll be sufficient to trigger this this dynamic trigger. All right. So when the player flies through here, through that area around that locator, they found the ship basically, and so this needs to do a couple of things, because we're going to move on now from the reconnaissance part of this to the battle part. So on the dynamic trigger, a new logic connection when entered by player any. First thing we want to do is come and turn on the rail target points. Make that same connection for the other two. On the dynamic trigger, a new logic connection when entered by player. Any. We want to go over to the sound effect generator. Excuse me. And we want to play a sound to let the player know they found the ship. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Trying to minimize the number of times I fly back over here, but it's just not going to be able to be helped. Alright, so on the sound generator, we're going to go under the general category. We're going to play the beeping sound. And on the properties for the sound generator, turn off 3D sound at speaker or locator so you can hear this wherever you are in the toy box. Alright, back to our Star Destroyer. And we should be over here for a little while now. Do-do-do-do. It's pretty spread out, this toy box, but kind of can't help it because when you're flying in the flying vehicles, you can travel pretty far, pretty fast. Alright, on the dynamic trigger, new logic connection when entered by player. Any. I'd like to turn off the dynamic trigger, but again, I can't come around and make a logic connection back to itself. So that's why we have the logic gate here. So we're going to input into the logic gate. And then on the logic gate, new logic connection on output, turn off the dynamic trigger. Because we only want to do this once. So once the reconnaissance has been completed and we found the ship, and we've turned on our rail target points, played our sound, we don't need this dynamic trigger anymore, so we want to turn it off. Alright, now the next part of this is controlled by the rail target points. So every time the player hits one of these, we want to keep track of the number of hits, and they have to hit the Star Destroyer 3 times. And so that's why we're using this counter. So on the counter, we're going to set the properties. The target count, we're going to set this to 3. Visible display is on. The rest of these are fine. Okay. So on the rail target points, we're going to do a new logic connection. When hit, we'll come over to our counter. Oops. And we are going to increment the count by 1. Make that same connection for the other 2 rail target points. New logic connection when hit. Increment the counter by 1. And make the same connection for the other one. I don't need to show you all 3 because they're the same. And now everything else will be driven by the counter. So, new logic connection. Every time the count is changed, we want to launch TIE fighters off of the other Star Destroyers. Okay? Because at this point, you're done reconnaissance, you're starting to attack, and you want the fleet to start defending itself. So on the counter, we're going to do a logic connection. When the count is changed, we're going to come over here to this little block that we set up. And we're going to invoke the time delayer to start the delay. And if we don't use a time delayer and we go direct to all of those ships to launch TIE fighters, the TIE fighter launch will be instantaneous with the hit on the target, the rail target point. And so we really don't want to do that. We want to have a bit of a delay here. So on the properties for the time delayer, we'll set the delay time to be about 3 seconds. That should be sufficient. And then on the time delayer, new logic connection, when that delay is completed, we will input into this logic gate. These two logic connections here, these two creativitoys, are not for every Star Destroyer. We're going to hook up all of our destructible Star Destroyers to this. And we're going to hook this up to all of the ones that can't be destroyed in a little bit here. And so we're going to reuse these two toys for each of the Star Destroyers. So that's why these are out here a little bit away from the fleet, to kind of let you know that those apply to the mission as a whole, not per Star Destroyer. Okay, back to our counter. So when the count is changed, we invoke that time delayer to launch TIE fighters. Now on the counter, a new logic connection, when the target is reached, and the target count again is 3, that means the Star Destroyer has been destroyed. So there's several things we want to do when that happens. First thing I want to do is come over to my effects generator, and we are going to play one time out of the explosions category, the huge explosion. And that's going to occur at all of the locators that we're going to connect this to. So on the effects generator, we're going to do a new locator connection. We're going to connect that up to each of these locators. And you need all those locators because this thing is huge. And just one locator isn't going to create an explosion large enough to be able to cover the entire Star Destroyer. You want it to look like the whole thing is blowing up. And you want this to cover up the fact that we're going to clear that replayer in a minute. So you don't want to see the Star Destroyer just kind of vanishing. You want it to look like it blew up. As you can see, this takes a little bit of time to hook all of this up. Again, it's not difficult, just takes time. And you might be wondering, gosh, is it really worth it to do all of this? Because this is going to take a while. And the answer to both questions is yes, it is going to take a lot of time. It took me about 6 hours to hook everything up when I built this the first time. But is it worth it? Well, you can watch the playthrough video in episode 1 and you tell me. That was a lot of fun to play, and I thought it was definitely worth it. It's a lot of work, but man, is it rewarding. Okay, so it looks like I've hooked up to all 6 of those locators. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, okay. Alright, so on the counter, new logic connection. When target is reached, not only are we going to do the effects generator, but we need to play a sound that goes along with that. And so once again, back to the asteroid. Do. By the way, as I was setting up mine, let me finish this first. Okay, so on the general category, under action, we're going to do the large explosion. So that's our sound effect that goes with that. And by the way, when I was hooking up all of these toys, I did, for one of these, I moved some of the creativitoys there from the asteroid out here. And that saved a little bit of back and forth. But then moving those toys back to the asteroid, that took a long time. Because you go slower than you even do in spark mode, unfortunately. All right, on the counter, new logic connection. When target is reached, back to the asteroid, because there's another sound effect we want to play. It's my typical end of mission sound. But I've already made a logic connection to the sound effect generator, so I can't make a second one directly. And that's why I placed this logic gate over here next to the sound effect generator. So we will input into that, and then on that logic gate, new logic connection on output, come to our sound generator, and under the musical category, we'll play our standard fanfare, which is what I like to do for the end of the mission. All right, back to the Star Destroyer. La da 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 da. I thought about editing a lot of this out, but that would create a ton of work for my editing process. So if you want, you can fast forward a little bit as I'm going back and forth. All right, so on the counter here, the last thing I want to do, new logic connection on target reached. We're going to come over to the replayer for that Star Destroyer and clear it. So the explosion will be happening, and that will cover up the Star Destroyer vanishing. And this is the part you can kind of fast forward through, although you might miss a little bit of what I have to say. And we clear. Okay. Oh, there is one more thing we have to do. Sorry. Back we go. I just was looking at my notes and realized there was another thing I had to do. No, I'm not going to sing for you. All right, on the counter. New logic connection. When the target is reached, we need to hide all of the rail target points. So we're going to turn those off. Make that same connection for the other two. When the target is reached on the counter, turn off the other two rail target points. Okay? So that is everything you have to do for the Star Destroyer. Now you're going to do those same steps for each of the destructible Star Destroyers. So I've got 4 more here. If you're doing 10 replayers, you're going to have another 9 of these to do. The more Star Destroyers you have that you can destroy, where the Teasel could be hiding, is going to be better for the gameplay, but it is going to take longer to hook it all up. So just be aware of that. Okay. So again, those 4 controls, the locators and the rail target points, hook them up as I've done for this one, for the other destructible Star Destroyers. All right, so back to the asteroid now. How are we doing on time? 39 minutes, wow. It's a longer episode than usual, so sorry about that, but can't really break this part of it up. Okay, so when the level begins and the player enters this toy box, the level starter needs to kick off the mission. And we have to pick which one of those Star Destroyers is going to be carrying the Teasel. So right now, this level starter, after you've hooked up all the other Star Destroyers, this is disabling all of those rail target points. It's disabling all of the dynamic triggers. Okay? So we want to pick one and turn on the dynamic trigger for the one that's going to be the one carrying the Teasel. And for that, we're going to use a randomizer. So on the level starter, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. We're going to come over here first to our time delayer. I don't want to go directly to the randomizer because the level starter is turning off dynamic triggers, and what we're going to do now is going to turn one of them on. And so we want to give the level starter time to finish doing all of that before it turns on the one that's going to be for our mission. So that's why we have the time delayer here. And I'm going to set the delay to be 5 seconds. That should be plenty of time. The player is not going to get from over there to the fleet in 5 seconds anyway, so that should be okay. On the time delayer, a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we come to our randomizer and do action. And on the randomizer, new logic connection for random trigger 1. I'm going to hook up to the the dynamic trigger, that goes along with this replayer, which is the one we just hooked up. So on random trigger 1, we're going to come out here and turn on the dynamic trigger for this Star Destroyer. All of the others will be off. So the player has to go and fly past each Star Destroyer to find out which one is turned on. That'll turn that on. And you'll hook up random trigger 2 to the next one, random trigger 3 to the next one, and so on. So with my setup here, I'll only be using random triggers 1 through 5. If you're going to have 10 Star Destroyers, you'll use all 10 triggers. Okay. And I'm just reviewing my notes here. All right. And that's really it for the mission. There's one more thing we're going to do here, but let me just review what we've got. So again, level starter turns off all the dynamic triggers out there for the destructible ships, turns off all the rail target points. Comes over to our time delayer. 5 seconds later, that invokes the randomizer, which will turn on the dynamic trigger for the one Star Destroyer that's our target. The player flies through or past all of the bridges for the Star Destroyers, and when they pass through the one whose dynamic trigger is turned on, that will then turn on the rail target points for that Star Destroyer and also play a sound. Then the player shoots those targets. After they shoot them each time, we're going to be launching TIE fighters, which I'm going to hook up next. And after they rack up 3 hits, we destroy the Star Destroyer and the mission is over. So that's the flow. Now, to hook up the Star Destroyers launching TIE fighters, we don't want to be hooking that up and making logic connections to the Star Destroyers we're going to remove. So at this point, I'm going to temporarily clear each of these replayers. So that takes that one out. Takes that one out. Takes that one out. And that one. And that one. So those are all of the Star Destroyers now that are not destructible. Okay. So now we're going to come out over here to our logic gate on this little terrain block. And we're going to reuse this logic gate next time as well. But what you're going to do now is you are going to do a new logic connection on output. And you're going to hook up to the vast majority of your Star Destroyers here. Pick about 10 of them, 8 to 10 of them that are spread around. And so on output from the logic gate, you're going to do a start on the Star Destroyer. And I'd pick ones that are scattered around the fleet near the ships that have the near the ships that have the creativitoys. So you can kind of see where the creativitoys are out here near where we're going to be flying. So if this is our Star Destroyer that's picked, it'd be nice to have some of these launching TIE fighters as well. And so you're just going to go ahead and do that. You can hook up to all of them if you want. On my Wii U, I can only handle about 18 to 20 TIE fighters. And I got 2 launching from each Star Destroyer. So that means about 9 to 10 Star Destroyers is all I can hook up to with my logic gate here. But you're going to hook that up for all of those. Okay? And so as soon as you hit the rail target now, that counter on count changed will invoke this, which will 5 seconds later invoke this, which will cause all the Star Destroyers you hook up to start launching TIE fighters. When you're done hooking up this logic gate to all of the Star Destroyers, then you can go back to the replayers and do a playback on each one to put the destructible ships back. And that is it for the main mission. You have all the logic you need there. You know what you need to do for each Star Destroyer. You know what you need to hook up from the asteroid surface over there, and what you need to hook up here. So next time we'll finish this toy box and wrap up this series by implementing the logic for luring the Imperial TIE fighter over to that asteroid and luring that pilot there so that we can obtain the Armada's recognition codes and what happens if you fail to do that. But that's all for me today. For those of you who are building this toy box on your own systems, you can find logic diagrams on my blog to help you connect the toys I used today. The link is in the video description. Have a great weekend.